Jimmy Garoppolo, in maybe his final game as a 49er, gave us the full Garoppolo experience. His tenure is often a Rorschach test, allowing fans to see efficient command of the middle of the field or limited range and head-scratching turnovers, depending on what you choose to see. And both of these were on display in Thursday night's loss. We've got 6 plays for you that really encapsulate the Garoppolo experience against Tennessee, and we start in the first quarter. This is early in we start in the fourth quarter. This is early in the fourth quarter, 12:37. It's 1st and 10. This is one of his favorite routes to throw. It's just an in-breaking dig route to Deebo Samuel. And Deebo Samuel is able to get a couple of yards after the catch. And he's very, very excited about this catch.
Not even the best Deebo catch that we're going to show in there. But hey, look, he's pumped. This one is nice because, as you kind of mentioned at the top, right, we see Jimmy kind of go back and forth between being able to make great throws like this to the middle of the field that are, well-timed, accurate, put in a spot that allows his receivers to do what they do best and get yards after the catch. And as we'll see in a couple of the bad ones later, sometimes he just seems to have no idea what's going on in the middle of the field and just completely loses track of defenders there. But I think, yeah, in this one, we see him kind of start left, right? Here as he hits the last step in his drop, looking to the combination that he's got over the left there with Jennings and Ayuk. Honestly, I think he might even have Ayuk there. The corner that's on the outside on that side of the field is kind of cheating up and kind of looking to drive on that Jennings route. And so I think there's a window there to make that throw to Ayuk if he wants it. But I can understand why, because a lot of times the corners are going to, kind of sit there and almost try to bait that throw that's a little bit deeper, knowing that they've got the help over the top from the safety, right? So I can see just him maybe not fully trusting it and wanting to kind of move on from it. And so you see him get back to the other side, and right as pressure's closing in on him, able to deliver an accurate throw there and move the chains and keep this drive going.
Yeah, and look at the high-low read there between Kittle and Deebo. I mean, ultimately, what Kittle commands is 2 defenders that just go right towards him as soon as Deebo comes across the field, back to the backside concept, and they both flow real hard to Kittle. And that's what leaves the space in the middle of the field for Deebo Samuel to have his catch and run. And I mean, it's not like the perfect ball. You want this to be a little out in front, but it is absolutely on target. Basically hits Deebo in the face mask, and he does the rest. And it's a first down on a situation where they needed to get some yardage in order to keep the drive moving. So now we move to another play in the fourth quarter. This is much later in the game. This is just under 4 minutes, and now we're at 2nd and 10. This is another in-breaker to Deebo with more yards after the catch. This is a better catch and more yards after the catch. And this was the play where you think to yourself, man, the Niners might actually win this game. They might pull this game out. And that is, everything about this. This is what Jimmy does. Like, this is him picking apart the middle of the field, which is an area that quarterbacks don't typically like to throw into because it's congested. It's muddled. And he has another dart to Deebo that gets more yards after the catch.
Right. And I think this one is kind of more typical of the things that we've seen him do consistently well, right? Because the last one was even a little bit more complex because you're talking about moving from one side of the field back to the other side to get the backside concept there. Got pressure, that's starting to close in on you, and so you don't really have time to step into the throw. He's just kind of having to throw it flat-footed, and so the degree of difficulty on that one's higher. I think here you look and see basically first read is open, throw it on time, good enough ball location here. And so this is kind of the things that we see, right? Whether it's a concept that Shanahan is setting up there to be able to pick apart zone coverage and get somebody open, or in this case, you've got man coverage. Titans are in cover 1 here, and so it's on Deebo to kind of create that separation and beat his man, which he does. Gets a little push off there, but hey, we're going to give it to him. And so you end up with this nice little window because the free player underneath there, Evans, number 54, is kind of starting to the opposite side, looking to help maybe a little bit more on Kittle, who's over there. And so he's not really in position to get underneath this throw too far away to the middle of the field. And so you've got a nice little window here for Jimmy to be able to throw it to. And this is, these are the ones that we've seen him just kind of succeed on and be very efficient on, is the open first read throws to the middle of the field. This is kind of where he's done most of his damage.
Yeah, and I mean, it is again another in-breaking route. It looks a little bit like a dagger concept, basically, where you've got a clear out route in the middle, and then Debo operating right behind it. And yeah, that whole player has no chance. It's on time, first read. You get it out in front of him, and this one's a little out in front of Debo, so it allows him to get more yards after the catch. And then Debo's tired. He's been running a lot. He does a lot for this team. It's a lot to carry the weight of the team on your back, I guess.
Yeah.
And then we get to a little bit later in the fourth quarter. Not too much later after the play that we just showed. And this is a touchdown dart in the back of the end zone. And it is just taking advantage of a Titans defense that looks absolutely and 100% confused about what's going on, because they may expect this to go quick out to, the machine that is the new machine for the 49ers. Jawan Jennings near the end zone, near the goal line. He caught an out route in the last game against the Falcons. And it seems like that's where everyone thinks the ball's going. And then Jimmy Garoppolo says, "Not today, son," and throws it to the back of the end zone to Ayuk.
Yeah, so I think the where the breakdown comes in, you can actually see the corner there, 26, and then it's a safety, Pro Bowl safety, I believe, Kevin Byard right there with the red arm sleeve kind of over Sherfield in the slot. And so you can see them kind of communicate here, right? And so everybody else, what they're doing is this ultimately is like a cover zero coverage, right? Man coverage, but it's kind of a goal line variation of that. And rather than selling out in an all out blitz, like you would typically see more out in the field if teams are going to go with a zero blitz, here you're going to end up with kind of two free players underneath. So you can look and see, essentially you've got the three guys that are over the bunch there. And we're going to exclude the linebacker that's kind of on the edge there and kind of the white shoes. Not sure exactly who that is, but he's going to be one of the free players. And then on the opposite side, you've got the two players that are kind of wide of the defensive line that are going to be responsible for Kittle and Wilson over there to the other side. So the other two players that you have there, the linebacker that's up on the line over Sherfield and the one in the middle of the field, are just kind of free players that are going to look to help on any of the underneath kind of in-breaking stuff. And so what they're doing, what the corner and Byard are doing here, is communicating that they're going to kind of switch things, right? But Byard doesn't actually do that. So you end up seeing the corner let Ayuk go inside because he thinks that Byard's going to pick it up, and then go to pick up Sherfield on the outbreaker, right? And he kind of realizes it's not happening and tries to make a late play for it. But obviously the damage is done at that point. And so I think, yeah, you don't see the safety pick this up as he should, and so it ends up wide open, and Jimmy does a good job of not making a more difficult throw, because I think he could, try to get this to Jennings, right? There's definitely some separation, but you're talking about an out-breaking route, a much further throw with a defender that's in much tighter coverage than basically Ayuk running free in the back of the end zone, right? So it doesn't force the more difficult throw, recognizes the breakdown, finds Ayuk for the touchdown. So I think good overall play from him.
And this is about a 15-yard throw. And look at how he whips this ball, how he torques his body and turns it. And basically he's looking left and then hitch. And then just, I don't even know that he moves like his lower base, right? Like he just whips it with his arm.
All shoulders.
And yeah, it's all shoulder, it's all arm. And he whips it in there. That's the kind of stuff that when you're looking at a quarterback, that's kind of tantalizing, right? That's what you would say is the separation between the upper body and the lower body. And the quarterback that does that the best and is known for doing that is Aaron Rodgers. He's the guy who kind of disassociates his lower from his upper and can make ridiculous throws because of that. So you're like, okay, Jimmy's feeling it. He's slanging it, right?
Yeah.
This is the thing that entices you about Jimmy Garoppolo, where you see that command of the middle of the field. You see him move off of his reads. You see the arm talent, and you're like, I can work with this. We can get to a Super Bowl with this. And the Niners did.
They sure did. I don't know if we're going to get another one, but hey.
Well, and it's because of what happens on the other side of the Jimmy Garoppolo roller coaster. And so now we get to the first quarter. This is 1:37 left in the first quarter. It's 2nd and 8. This is an interception of George Kittle. This is just a throw that Jimmy Garoppolo is, he trusts certain guys. He fixates on certain guys. And one of those guys is Jimmy Garoppolo. There's a reason that two linebackers flowed really hard, or to George Kittle. There's a reason that the linebackers flowed really hard to Kittle And that's because that's where he likes to throw. And here he expects Garoppolo, he expects, Kittle to make a play. And instead it's Jackrabbit Jenkins who jumps in front.
Jackrabbit Jenkins. Yeah, so
Who
I mean, I
jumps
think
in
that's
front. I got to get credit for the jumps. He jumps in front. It's a rabbit pun. Come on. Come on, David.
all right. It was subtle, but I'll give it to you. Yeah, so I think that, I mean, this is absolutely it, right? He's just trusting his guy to make a play because there's never a point where this feels especially open, right? I mean, I think the thing that you could say in Jimmy's favor, if you're trying to kind of give him some benefit of the doubt here, is this is a route that ultimately is going to break kind of more inside, right? So Kittle right here is going to make a break like he's going to the post, and then he's going to bring it back down and cut back inside on like a curl type route. And so you could say, okay, I've got this route that's going to be a ball that really needs to be thrown more to the inside of Kittle, and the defender here, as he's kind of making that break, has outside leverage. So I think, okay, maybe I'm going to end up with a leverage advantage here, and I'm just going to trust my guy to be able to win back to it. But you can see even here, right, as Jimmy's kind of starting the windup, like Jenkins is all over this. Like, I mean, he's all over Kittle. It's not looking good here even before Jimmy lets go of the ball. And so this is, yeah, absolutely just a situation where he found a one-on-one matchup with, you know, his best offensive player probably, and is just trusting his guy to get it done, right? And hoping that he's going to get some separation that he needs to there. And it just never happens, right? Jenkins reads it well, jumps in front of Kittle, and doesn't really give him much of an opportunity here to even make a play on this ball. And so this is just one where, yeah, it's kind of a forced throw, putting maybe a little bit too much faith in one of your guys and not having the ball location really to do it, right? I think if you're going to just make this throw on some sort of almost blind faith, right, that your guy's going to be able to win it, you gotta put it up higher, right? So lean it inside, but put it up in a spot where either only Kittle's going to be able to go up over the top and get it, or it's going to sail and be an overthrow and just go harmlessly out of bounds. But when you leave it kind of lower here, in a spot where the defender can get to it, like that's just something you can't do down here in the red zone and give those points away.
So now we get to a play in the second quarter, 4:37 in the second quarter. And this wasn't a turnover. This wasn't an interception, but it probably should have been were it not for the Titans tipping this football. This is just a bad decision. It's actually a fairly decent play from the linebacker, and it almost looks like he baits him. And Jimmy Garoppolo does sometimes have trouble with reading linebackers underneath, especially. It's this kind of post-snap confirmation thing that sometimes he fails at. And here he thinks the linebacker is opening up. Turns out he ain't. And he comes back and tips the ball. And it may save him actually from an interception because, I mean, 37 is probably going to get this ball if he doesn't.
Yeah, Hooker, the safety there, right, is all over this as well. And so I think this is one where, right, like we simultaneously talk about him doing so much damage in the middle of the field, but also you have plays like this that creep up where it's just like he seems to have no clue what's going on in the middle of the field. And so, yeah, you look, he's looking over to the right, to the trip side, and I think he sees the underneath linebacker here, right, 54, and he does kind of show like he's going to match on Juice, right? He's kind of focused on him right away, isn't really looking to get any sort of drop. So you think, okay, maybe he's just going to match up with Juice there, and I'm going to have this window to throw in over the top of him and kind of behind him. And he does peel off and does a good job of getting back into this throwing lane and is going to be a factor even if this ball isn't tipped, right? But then you have Hooker there that's 37 down at the bottom, and he's opening up because they're in a quarters coverage here. So he's actually opening up to the trip side, looking for these in-breakers, right? He's looking for the crossing routes that are coming towards him so that he can kind of pick that up and cut it off. And if you look him, like even if this ball isn't ultimately tipped, like he's driving on this, and there's a very good chance that even if Evans isn't there, even if the ball doesn't get tipped, that he's the one that's kind of undercutting this and picking it off, and probably doing some more damage with it right after the catch, and maybe taking this back to the house. And so, yeah, this is one for Jimmy, and it feels like there are so many with him. Like he I think has had some pretty good luck overall when it comes to the amount of turnover worthy plays that he has and the rate that those are actually converted to turnovers, especially this season, it feels like. And so this is one where, yeah, like this is just an incompletion, right, on the stat sheet. And it doesn't really go to show like the full scope of this play and kind of, you know, what he's missing and how he's forcing throws into dangerous spots and just getting very fortunate that they're not coming up as interceptions.
And this is not too dissimilar of a concept from the very, very first play we showed, where you've got an underneath player, like Juszczyk in this case, and then you've got the in-breaker behind him, and it is going to try to create this kind of high-low separation. But on the first play was Kittle, and everyone flowed super hard to Kittle, which is what opened it up to Debo. But now it's a different coverage. I mean, this isn't like a super disguised coverage by any stretch. I mean, it looks like you've got a too high shell. It looks like you're playing quarters. Like, he should be able to diagnose this at this point in his career, and he's still just kind of throwing it into a very, very highly trafficked area, and is fortunate that it wasn't an interception and the game didn't get even further out of hand. Last thing, Trent Williams, just lay on him, dude. Just go ahead and just enjoy Trent Williams for a snap, because him laying on that dude is really funny. There it is. All right, and then we get to the last play, and this was in the third quarter. With about 8:45 left, it's 1st and 10. This is an overthrow to Debo where he tries to take on a really high difficulty level throw, and does not execute it well, and effectively, turns the ball over again.
Yeah, I mean, this is just, it's one that could look maybe easier than it is in practice, because you can see, like, especially if we stay with the sideline view here for a minute, like, you can see the potential window there, right? So as he kind of gets to the back of his drop here, Evans, again, is going to be kind of the key underneath defender in this, that is going to have a chance to kind of sink and get underneath this route. And so you can see him doesn't actually get a lot of depth. I mean, here he's about 6 yards from the line of scrimmage, which is at the 25 on this play. So he's hanging out right there at the 31. Doesn't get, like, if anything comes up a little bit right after that. But Debo isn't that much deeper behind him even still. So even though, he isn't getting a ton of depth and isn't back there, I mean, really he should be at like the 35, right? And be in a great position to be able to make a play on this. But he's still in range, right? Being only in the kind of that 5 to 7 yard range away from the receiver. Like, it's difficult to, as a quarterback, get it up high enough to where that defender can't make a play on it, right? Because if you throw this on a line and as a bullet, like, he still has a chance to at least get a hand on it. But you also don't want this to happen, right? You don't want to put it so high that it sails over your receiver's head and then finds the safety who's kind of hanging out there behind him. And so that's what he's trying to do here is make this difficult kind of throw where he gets it up and down over the linebacker, and he just never gets it down, right? It's only up, and it finds its way to the safety. Debo never has a chance, and it's another turnover, right? And so, yeah, I think this is one where you're looking at less of a process. I think it's from a decision-making standpoint, you're not terrible here. Like, I don't necessarily love the throw, but he doesn't have a lot of better options here anyway. But it's more of an accuracy, execution, and just whether he has this sort of high level throw even in his tool bag to begin with.
Yeah, and so that's when you're thinking about what Garoppolo brings to the table and why he is such a kind of I called it a Rorschach test, where people can see what they want to see. They can see that arm length, that whip, or the arm strength, the whip. They can see the middle of the field. They can see those yards after the catch, and they can see his gaudy kind of yards per attempt stats. And they can say, yes, like, and he took us to a Super Bowl. He's good enough to get there. He's good enough to be that quarterback. Lots of teams would wish they had a quarterback like this. The unique expression of Jimmy Garoppolo's play, though, is not like that he's consistently average. He shows high level, like, good stuff, but then he craters out, and it's a ticking time bomb. You just never know when the bad Garoppolo is going to show up. And he could show up for a couple of games at the beginning of the year, like he did this year. He can show up in the fourth quarter of a Super Bowl. He can show up in this game that the Niners really needed to win, and he couldn't really get it done. He started turning the ball over, and I think that's ultimately the Garoppolo experience. Is you add that with some injuries, which he allegedly got this game. and all of a sudden I mean that is the full Garoppolo experience encapsulated in one game and what may be his final game.
I mean, it would be quite the game for him to go out on, that's for sure. Because yeah, I mean that's kind of the thing that has been so tough with him is the bad plays are really bad. Like they tend to be like of the real awful variety, and it's not like a lot like the final interception that we showed there to Hooker, like where it's you have an overthrow and yeah, it's like a more difficult throw to execute, but really it comes down to accuracy, right? Is kind of the main culprit as to why that play fails. You don't see necessarily a ton of those type of bad throws from him, right? Like even across the rest of his throws in this game, when you look at like Pierre just misses. Obviously, there was the juice one, which is something that everybody is very familiar with, right? But I think he only had two other throws that were, basically misses where he's inaccurate on the play. And one of those is a deep bomb to Jennings, which probably was never going to have a chance anyway. And so you're talking about one other throw that could be completed that wasn't, right, that where he just couldn't do it from an accuracy standpoint. He tends to make those easy throws, right? At least get him in decent enough spots that his guys can make a play on him. But when he fails so hard. And I think that's been the difficult thing is like you have a guy that can have these disastrous performances or stretches of play, and he just doesn't have the consistent, like super high level stuff to offset it, right? Because you see guys that are successful across the league that do have some bad plays, some turnover worthy plays, at a reasonably high rate, but they also make big plays down the field at a pretty high rate. And so it helps to kind of balance things out, right? Because you're creating some of these big plays for your offense. And he's just so reliant on everybody else around him. I think it's a perfect example of why you shouldn't look at just like basic box score stats to evaluate quarterbacks. Like with passer rating, any of that completion percentage like does not tell the story with what we've seen from this guy in his time in San Francisco.
Well, the way that we will end what may be the last video about Jimmy Garoppolo that we're going to do here on this channel is that he started his career with a touchdown throw against Seattle, and his last throw as a Niner was a touchdown, I think, against Tennessee. So his first and last throw potentially as a 49er, both touchdowns, and it was a lot of roller coasters in the middle. And that's how we leave our man Jimmy Garoppolo. That does it for this week's Patreon video. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. Thanks to everyone who is watching this because they bought us a beer. We will get very, very drunk for one reason or another after this Trey Lance start, or what looks like a Trey Lance start. So thank you for supporting all of our terrible habits. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. And as always, go Niners.